Tonight marks 111 years since the tragic murder of 8 people in Villisca. To this day, the murders remain unsolved.
Everybody loved them. It's like, think of that family from your small hometown that everyone loves, everyone respects, nobody has a problem with. Joe was a businessman, Sarah was a housewife, played piano for the church.
8 people dead, 6 of them children, struck with an axe while they slept. Their skulls crushed beyond recognition. The murder suspects include a power-hungry politician with a grudge, a sexually perverted preacher, and a mysterious killer who had struck before. No, this isn't the plot to a new Hollywood thriller. This is a true crime case at its worst.
Yes, Lord, and delivered you unto me, and I will
Welcome back to Staircase Conspiracies, a podcast that dives into the strange and mysterious. I'm your host, Nathan, and tonight I'll be telling my cousin and co-host Nico the chilling, true, unsolved case of the Villisca Axe murders. Ever heard of this one?
No, I have not. I have not heard of this one, but I'm super excited because it's been so long since we've done a dual podcast together. So this is going to be sweet.
Yeah, I cannot wait to tell you this one. So this is a case that continues to haunt the small town of Villisca, Iowa to this day. So without further hesitation, let's get into it. Villisca, Iowa was primarily known as a small but prosperous community in rural America. It was a town centered around agriculture, with farming and livestock playing significant roles in its economy. But on June 9th, 1912, the town's peaceful and close-knit atmosphere was shaken when 8 people were brutally murdered in their beds. The victims included parents Josiah and Sarah Moore, their 4 children, and 2 young neighbor girls who were staying overnight. The killer, wielding an axe believed to have been owned by the Moore family, left behind a scene of unimaginable horror.
Man, can you imagine having your son or daughter sleep over at somebody's house and then get them being brutally murdered? I can't even imagine that.
I know, I would be saying, the chances, the likelihood of that one time of saying, all right, you're good to go tonight.
Yeah. That's terrible, man.
It all began the night at their local church. The family was having a Children's Day program that went late. Members of the church were waving goodbye after discussing small talk about the coming weeks. Josiah and Sarah, along with their children, Paul Moore, age 5, Boyd Moore, age 7, Catherine Moore, age 10, Herman Moore, age 11, and Catherine's 2 friends, sisters, Lena Gertrude Stillinger, age 12, and Ina Mae Stillinger, age 8. They were all starting for their home, which was only a mere 3 blocks away. The 2 young sisters, Lena and Ina Stillinger, had been too scared to walk home alone and requested to stay with the Moore family that night. So exactly what you were saying. They had been, too afraid, because I guess they were at the children's church program alone without their parents for some reason. And, instead of having them walk home, it would have just been easier for them to just stay the night at, the Moore family's house. God, man, you've been better off walking home, man. Yeah, whatever was out in that dark would have been much safer than what was to find.
That's terrifying.
Yeah, terrifying. Once home, the family followed their usual nightly routine and settled in for the night. Unfortunately, they would never wake again. The next morning, Mary Peckham, a neighbor, noticed that no one in the Moore household had started their daily chores. Concerned, she went next door to do the neighborly thing and feed their chickens. But something felt off. When she looked at the windows of the home, all of them had been covered by bedsheets or curtains. So it wasn't like their usual, curtain. This was the family that would always keep their curtains open, the doors unlocked, that kind of thing. So Mary, the neighbor, she looks up at the house and she sees that, there's jackets and quilts and stuff like that, just basically blocking the sun.
Yeah, and probably religious with their chores, like they were saying, feeding the chicken. So, it's really obvious to see, something's off.
That's exactly right. So she thinks that something is off about this situation, which leads her to call Ross Moore, which is Josiah's brother. And whenever he gets there, he finds her and she's in a complete panic. She's, pointing at the windows saying that, something's not right. They're covering up the windows. Their chores aren't being done. And he's trying to calm her down. He's saying, hey, everything's going to be okay. Don't worry about it. Everything's fine. So he pulls out his key and he unlocks the door. And whenever he walks in, he is hit with the smell that he's pretty sure, he works on the farm. He's pretty sure what he's about to find. And the next few moments of this man's life is a pure waking nightmare.
I'm trying to imagine seeing a family that lives on a farm and, you walk up and all the windows are covered with, sheets and whatnot. That would definitely set off some alarms in my head. Like, that's really weird.
Especially whenever you have so many people in this family. I mean, they have they had 4 children, 2 of them. That's 6 people in this household. Plus you have 2 extra ones. Now, of course the neighbor probably doesn't know that there is 2 extra kids, but she is surely used to seeing 4 kids occupying this home, 2 adults occupying the home. All of them have chores that they got to be doing, and not seeing a single thing.
So Josiah is walking into, like you said, like a nightmare. He has no idea what he's in for, and just imagine. This is probably some sort of a huge murder scene. I'm just imagining here, and it's just his family in there. His brother's family.
Yeah, I'd imagine that he's probably a little bit nervous, but probably, a little hopeful. Nothing in this town, this is back in 1912. This is not a time where this kind of thing happens. So he's probably pretty hopeful and just thinking that, maybe the kids are just acting weird and putting some stuff up in the windows and having fun, having a goof.
Like maybe the kids put it up, like you said, or something. They're watching a movie. Well, never mind, not in a movie because it's 1912. But I was gonna say, but yeah, just I don't know, reading a book or something, whatever people did back then to make it scary stories and blocking out the lights and whatever. But maybe the kids were playing, so probably walked in thinking you're all, just chilling in there and doesn't know what he's in for, man.
Well, unfortunately, that was not it. The smell in the house reeked of death, and the first pair of bodies that he came to were the 2 young Stillinger girls in the guest bedroom. When he walked in, he could see blood painting the walls and ceiling all over the place. And just a few feet away from that door was an axe, just full of blood, just sitting propped up right there at the door.
On display, almost like they're proud, like, check this out.
Exactly. So Ross decides to get the heck out of there. He stumbles out of the house in shock and horror, and he calls for the county marshal, Hank Horton, to come to the house and just, to finish out the rest of the search by himself. When Hank arrives, he soon discovers the entire Moore family dead inside of the home. He realized this was going to be a much bigger case than he could possibly handle. And at the time of the murders, the state police or FBI actually hadn't even been fully established yet to handle such crimes. So the locals had to actually gather donations to hire private investigators from the Burns Detective Agency out of Kansas City, Missouri, just to be able to find out what happened to this family. It actually required the locals in the town to pull their money together to be able to solve this, or attempt to solve this case.
Wow, that is nuts. Just imagine how easy it would be to get away with this stuff back then.
Yeah.
There's no like FBI, like you said. There's no real local people. What is there, like maybe a sheriff?
So there actually is, so he was a county marshal, so that's what they had in the town, was the county marshal.
Right.
There is the FBI at this time, but they're involved in like big cases, not like a crime at a local, like a small, at now the FBI is so big they could like get involved maybe with something like this, but at the time there was nothing. So that's how they had to do it. And thankfully, that they had these agencies they could reach out to, more so thankfully to a town that actually cared about the Moore family and wanted to find out, what happened to them. And needless to say, it's definitely put the town on edge for sure.
Just imagine having to pull money together to try and just see what happened, to start an investigation. If you can't put the money together and hire somebody like an outside investigator, like you said, then, I mean, you're not going to know what the hell happened. You're basically screwed.
Yeah, exactly. So after the agency and, some investigators were able to investigate the scene and take a look, this is basically how they say things went down that night. So they don't even explain how the killer got into the home. That is never explained. The only evidence that we have for this is that there were allegedly some cigarette butts found in the attic, and nobody in the home smoked. So this could be what they call like a frogging. Have you ever heard of that? Frogging,
No.
where they
Somebody living up there?
Yeah, where someone like lives up in the attic. So it could have been, one of those type of situations. So we don't really know how he ended in there, but we can just start with how the murders took place. So
Dude,
first,
that's so fucking scary to imagine that somebody could be just living up in your attic. You have no idea.
yeah,
Oh my
and
God.
I think this probably happens a little bit more frequently than people know. I mean, if they're doing their job right, you'll never know that they're there.
Especially in like big houses, I would imagine.
Exactly. First, the killer started with Josiah and Sarah. Raising the axe high above his head, he brought the blunt end down on the sleeping mother's face, caving it in. So he did not use the sharp end.
Oh my God.
He's using the blunt end,
Like the fat end on the
the
other.
fat end
Oh my
on the
God.
other side. He would even leave marks in the ceiling from how high he would swing the axe. He would leave marks from the sharp end in the ceiling. That's how much of a ferocious kind of attack he was swinging at.
Damn, so I'm looking at the ceilings here. I mean, if I I guess I was thinking maybe he's like a real tall guy, but yeah, I guess I would probably hit the ceiling too if I had an axe and I was killing somebody.
Yeah. The killer would then move on to Josiah, who was sound asleep next to her, and for unknown reasons decided to use the sharp end of the axe this time, and he would drive the blade deep into Josiah's face.
Oh man, this is like disturbing as hell.
From there, he moved on to the children's bedrooms, once again brutally ending the lives of Herman, Boyd, Paul, Catherine with the blunt end of the axe. None of the more children woke during the massacre.
Damn, none of them woke up. Wow. I wonder how would they know that if they didn't wake up? Maybe because they're still in their beds?
Yeah, there's like no sign of them being disturbed or even like blood anywhere else in the room. All the blood is contained to one particular point.
Still tucked in and all that, I got you.
The killer would then return to Josiah's lifeless body and continue bludgeoning his skull to the point where his eyeballs had actually began to liquefy.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so he goes back into the bedroom of the parents again and just goes to town on Josiah's
Liquefied.
face.
Just completely smashed into, oh my God.
Yeah, can you imagine that?
I'm trying to, man. That's, oof. That's fucked up.
I think you've said this in past videos before, that that's a crime of passion. That's what it seems like to me.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Like that kind of anger towards Josiah in that way.
Yeah, that's a good point. That sounds like that probably is.
Unfortunately, the killer's actions weren't over yet. Making his way into the guest bedroom, he proceeded to bludgeon the two young Stillinger girls. The eldest of the two, Lena, appeared to have fought back as there were defensive wounds on her arm, kind of like what we were just talking about before. You could see where she had fought back, and she was actually found hanging off the bed.
Wow, you know what's so insane thinking about all this? It's like, you said they found cigarettes, right?
Allegedly, yeah.
Okay.
There's mixed reporting on that. Yeah.
Okay, let's say they did find cigarettes and there's, scratches, DNA under the fingernails. It's like, oh my God. It seems so easy now looking back. Like, that's your answer. The DNA all over the place. If you could just test it.
Exactly. It's there. You just can't test it.
It's right there, man.
The last disturbing detail we have about the murders of girls was that the underwear of Lena was found lying on the floor. It's apparently bloodstained from where the killer had wiped his axe off.
Oh, fuck, man.
Yeah, there's no actual reporting of any other kind of assaulting taking place, but that is a true detail that kind of is pretty disturbing.
Wow, yeah, that is extremely disturbing.
It's also reported that the killer, or killers maybe, stayed in the Moore family home for some time. They had actually went into the family home's pantry area and had grabbed a slab of bacon, not sliced bacon, but just a pound, just a big slab of it, and it was just lying in the living room of the home. And some people have actually theorized that this may have been part of some sort of ritual. It's, maybe it had something to do with meat or something. We're not really sure. It gets weirder though.
That's really interesting. Ritual.
It gets weirder though.
But that's a waste of bacon, man. Come on, dude.
Dude, seriously.
I'm starving right now, and that's just killing me, bro.
It gets even weirder. He even covers the bodies.
That's the real crime here, the bacon, so...
Okay,
No, I'm kidding.
Let's take a moment of silence for the bacon. He even covered the bodies, mirrors, and windows with blankets and clothes from the closets. So even after he was done murdering these people, he didn't even want to look at them either. He felt the need, I guess, to cover up the bodies and windows. Maybe he didn't want to look at himself. Maybe any of the reflective surfaces, he just, didn't want to see himself. But this is also kind of goes back to this idea of some sort of ritual, as, this might have some sort of ties to that by covering windows, and very odd behavior from the killer.
Yeah, that covering the bodies up, that's extremely interesting. It's almost like he's ashamed of it and covering up the reflection surfaces and all that. That's extremely interesting, because that sounds like he's ashamed of what he did. He or she or they or whatever. But that's I was looking in the mental part of things, what made this person do that, and body language and stuff. But I would love to find out, talk to a shrink or whatever, and kind of see what that would mean, covering up the body. And there's got to be other murders that happen with that. I'd be curious to see what that represents.
Can you not think of one other murder that we've actually covered on this channel that had a killer that covered the bodies and the windows and the mirror?
It was the last one we did together, the one with the family that was stacked up in the shed.
Yep, that's exactly right. The Hinterkaifeck.
Okay, yeah, that's it.
So let's put a pin in that. We'll revisit that in a
Link
second.
down below if you haven't listened to that one.
But we're starting to see some eerie similarities there between those two. So that's one of the odd pieces of evidence found there, was that these bodies were covered, windows were covered. It's very odd. The two are extremely similar. So super strange. Investigators would soon make a list of credible suspects and begin their search for the Villisca Axe murderer. The first suspect investigators would stumble upon was Reverend George Kelly, a traveling pastor who is actually the guest speaker at the church service the night of the massacre.
Not a reverend, man.
Yeah, this guy. Dude, this guy is a true creep deep down. He had been involved with the police on numerous occasions. And on one such occasion, he even attempted to solicit nude photos from young girls.
Oh, no.
He became a suspect after confessing to the crime. He even confessed to the crime. And although that would actually just be short-lived, he later recanted his confession, claiming that he had been coerced by the local authorities to kind of get that confession out of him. And adding to the validity of his new confession of innocence, there wasn't enough evidence to convict him, and he was ultimately acquitted on 2 separate occasions in court trials. At 2 separate times, he was brought before the courts for this case. And on both times, he was acquitted for it. They could not find enough evidence to pin this guy to the case, even though he had admitted to it, even though he was in the vicinity that night. He had seen the family that night. He was one of the guest pastors at the children's program that night.
So he admitted to these murders. What?
He admitted to them.
What if that happens where people confess to a crime that they really didn't do and just, I don't know why, but I wonder if that ever happens.
Well, in our very first staircase conspiracies, we covered the John Benet Ramsey case.
Yeah.
One of the guys from that case, John Mark Carr, he also admitted to the killing of John Benet Ramsey, but he couldn't answer any of the investigators' questions. He admitted to the case, but he couldn't give any details to that case. So you might say, oh, well, maybe he's like throwing the detectives off, but he's actually also bringing the detectives to him too. I think it's more of a cry for, just attention more than anything.
God, that's so weird, dude. You want attention, so you're gonna admit to a murder and maybe spend the rest of your life in prison? That's what?
And people know you, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, and that's. I think that has a big part of it too, is that they want to be famous and they want to be known as this big serial killer. Because unfortunately, like Charles Manson, all these guys, I wouldn't say like they're idols or anything, but they're like basically like legends in serial killers. They're kind of like really well known, and there's movies and all this. I know back then they weren't thinking about a lot of movies or whatnot, but just I think they want attention, like you said, and also some people think it's cool to be famous for that stuff, man.
Well, that's also a trait of a psychopath, is this idea of this grandiose idea that you're better than people, that you are this top dog, kind of mentality all the time. That's, obviously if you're a serial killer, you're probably a psychopath too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Over the next several decades after he was acquitted for this case, Kelly sent letters to the family and friends of the Moores, as well as the lead investigators on the case. Can you imagine that? Sending letters to, like, you were convicted of this case 2 different times, and now you're sending letters to the family and to their friends and to the investigators on the case? That's insane.
That's rubbing it into oh my God.
But after careful questioning, it became clear that Kelly had no details to offer, and anything he did say contradicted the crime scene. But here's what's really weird. In 1950, he was arrested in Kansas City, Missouri for the murder of his wife and daughter. He killed them.
My God.
He was suspected of using an axe similar to the method used in Villisca.
Wow.
So was Kelly the deranged killer? Was he watching them from his pulpit, planning this evil act all while preaching the gospel? Or was he innocent, if only in the Villisca Axe?
My God, dude. I just gotta say, there's a real special place in hell for people who take advantage of people like that. You read about like preachers or whatnot, essaying kids and whatnot, and or especially taking advantage of people, like, oh, I'll call and donate money and then I'll pray for you, and like all those, you would see him on like late night TV shows. There was one guy, I forget his name, but he would always do that and just taking advantage of people. It's just disgusting.
Yeah, in the name of God.
Yeah, exactly.
So the police moved on to their next suspect, Frank F. Jones. He was a local businessman who had a notoriously horrible relationship with Josiah. Josiah had gotten his start working for Jones through his business, and over time, Josiah had learned everything he could from Jones, and he left to start his own farming business. So the theory is that the direct competition led to a strong motive for the killing of the Moore family, and the growing rumor that Josiah had been having an affair with Jones's daughter-in-law. However, the rumors were never confirmed and no charges were ever really brought upon him.
Jeez, dude. All these people are just so messy around this case. Holy crap.
Yeah, I think they're just trying to just trying to find motives at this point. And, Frank F. Jones, he just had competition, and then maybe there was something there with an affair happening, that maybe he was kind of involved, but nobody really ever bought into this theory. He's definitely on the lower list of suspects for the case, but he was a suspect nonetheless.
Yeah, so he just had an axe to grind. Oh, so corny. He basically had like an issue with the family, had a beef with Josiah, so it makes sense to be a suspect.
The next suspect to fall under the spotlight was Henry Lee Moore. And this is no relation to the Moore family. This was so confusing whenever I came across this guy because it kept trying to connect, it was connecting him to the family, and then it was super, super frustrating. But Henry was an American serial killer who operated in New York City during the early 20th century. He had a knack for violence, and wherever he went, a string of fights would soon break out. He became infamous in the local Villisca area for his mean and dominant behavior. He wouldn't be arrested until 1913, a year after the crime, and by then, his killing spree ran up to 6 people. His victims were often impoverished or homeless women, leading to significant fear and panic among the city's residents at the time.
Of course, man, prey upon the weak.
His method of killing involved using an axe or hatchet to bludgeon, which earned him the nickname the Axeman. Moore's killing spree lasted from 1911 to 1912, and in 1913 he was arrested for killing his mother. But without enough evidence to pin Henry to the Villisca case, they were left yet again without a suspect. So it's super possible that, during this man's killing spree from 1911 to 1913, that the Moore family could have been a part of that killing spree. It had the similar hallmarks of, his other crimes. There was an axe. He was called the Axeman.
That's almost too obvious to be it. Yeah, well, let's keep going on the other ones. He's definitely number 1 on my list so far.
The final suspect on our staircase list, as there were plenty of others unlisted as always, was one previously mentioned on our channel, Paul Mueller, like you said before, in the Hinterkaifeck massacre. At the very end of that episode, he was one of the final names to come up on that list.
Oh, nice. Nice tie-in.
There's a bit of a connection here. So, Paul Mueller, also known as Paul Meerman, a lesser known but intriguing figure in this case, was a German immigrant who worked as a farmhand and laborer, which lends credit to him being a part of the Hinterkaifeck murders, which took place in Bavaria, Germany. His name surfaced in connection with a series of family murders across the United States, most notably the infamous 1897 murder of the Newton family in Illinois, where the entire family was killed with a blunt instrument. So he was directly tied to that case. And the case involved family all being killed in a similar way as the Villisca and the Hinterkaifeck.
With a blunt object. Wow.
Exactly.
What do you know?
Mueller's alleged method of killing bears a striking resemblance to the Villisca axe murders. And like the Villisca killer, Mueller often targeted families in their homes, using, like you said, blunt instruments such as axes or similar tools that he found at the crime scene. He tended to attack at night, often while his victims were asleep, and he left behind a gruesome, bloody scene. His transient lifestyle, often traveling by railroad, placed him in the vicinity of many of these crimes, making it difficult for law enforcement to ever track him down.
Yeah, keep moving, man.
Moving from city to city, making his killings just close to his exit getaway. Some of the parallels between the Hinterkaifeck massacre and the Villisca massacre are the staying after the killings inside the home for some time, getting into the pantry and food and potentially even eating some of that food that, we don't ever get to know if he ever ate any of that bacon or not, but we can presume that he probably, ate something there.
Yeah.
And then, of course, like we had already discussed, him covering his victims with the mirror, and the mirrors in the home.
Yeah.
pretty specific to both of those cases.
Yeah, absolutely.
And like we said earlier, both the Villisca and Hinterkaifeck homes were both located near railroad lines, which would have, like we said, facilitated Mueller's travels and allowed him to strike and then disappear without a trace. His ability to evade capture time and time again, moving from one place to another, makes him a plausible suspect in the Villisca Axe murders. But despite all these connections, no concrete evidence has ever been found to definitively link Mueller to the Villisca Axe murders or any other case.
Wow.
He has never been convicted for anything, even though he's connected to all of these different crimes. His potential involvement in the case is just purely speculation among true crime enthusiasts and historians and even podcasters like you and me. So could Paul Mueller have been the faceless terror that haunted Villisca that night in 1912? His known history and the patterns of his crimes certainly make him a suspect worth considering.
So it's all but Frank, I think, because I don't really think he has anything to do with it. I think he just didn't like the family. You know, families like kind of have like beefs with other families, especially like back then. You know, it's like, I don't know, it seems like it's a lot more relevant. Happens a lot more back then. But I think the other three, you could say all of them are the actual murderers. I mean, all of them line up almost perfectly.
And then there's even that it could be none of them.
Just throw them all in jail, though.
Yeah, they all seem like they could be in jail. You know, another thing to consider too is that if the whole town of Villisca was convinced that it was a local, like Frank Jones or even the Reverend, if they never looked outside of that city, if they never considered a transient as a potential suspect, then they ruled out and overlooked, you know, so much potential evidence that could have linked the suspect to someone outside of the local town. But I think that they were so narrow-minded, and, you know, I don't blame them, you know, especially for that time, but they were a little narrow-minded in thinking that, well, it had to have been someone that knew the family. How else could this have happened? I mean, it seems so unlikely that this brutality of Josiah's face would come from a stranger, someone just doesn't know him. It seems odd that someone would go in and kill, you know, a majority, you know, little kids were the main targets in this whole thing. You know, someone had to really seriously be deranged, you know, and then you even have little Lena that tries to fight back, you know, so it's not even a matter of, well, you know, they were just lying there, I could do it. It's like, no, even when the little kid was awake, you know, the killer still, you know, did what he did, so.
And going back, there was no forced entry, right?
No forced entry at all.
Oh, yeah, because we thought maybe they were living there in the attic.
Yeah, just like in the Hinterkaifeck case, there was no forced entry at all. That's why I remember in that case that we kind of thought that maybe the maid, which made me think, could Mary have been involved in this at all? I mean, you know, she noticed the bodies first, she called it in, she's acting, you know, a little suspicious. She would be a pretty unsuspecting person to let in the home. She could have stayed the night that night, slept over. I mean, like I said, you know, at that time, you know, no one's going to be suspecting little old woman Mary.
Yeah, absolutely.
The unsolved Villisca Axe murders remains one of the most chilling mysteries in American history. From the suspicious Reverend George Kelly, the embittered Frank F. Jones, the violent Henry Lee Moore, to the elusive Paul Mueller, each suspect adds a layer of intrigue and horror to this already nightmarish tale. But what truly happened that night in 1912? Was it a single deranged stranger, or was it someone they knew? The lack of concrete evidence means we may never know for sure. But one thing is certain. The shadow of these gruesome murders continues to loom over Villisca, a grim reminder that evil can enter into even our most trusted places. So who is it that you think the Villisca Axe murder might have been?
Well, like I said, all but Frank. I mean, you could do any one of those three and it would make sense. That's just how, I mean, they're all like fit almost exactly with the murders, which is insane. You never really see that, but I would say probably Paul Mueller.
Yeah, I would have to agree. And what's interesting about Paul Mueller is that he didn't even become a suspect until many years later when an author by the name of Bill James and his daughter Rachel McCarthy James, they wrote a book called The Man from the Train. And it was actually these two people were the ones who went around and got all this evidence for Paul Mueller and compiled it together. So if you want to find out any more about Paul Mueller, go check out The Man from the Train. They're the ones who basically, kind of blew this out of the water and started making all these connections to all these different crimes. They kind of think that it's possible that Paul Mueller may have been arrested for other crimes. Maybe he died. Maybe he never got arrested. Maybe he never died, and maybe he was never involved in any of these cases. But they are convinced that he is the one who's responsible for the Villisca, the Hinterkaifeck murders, many, many more.
Especially with the train, like that's the perfect sort of like getaway. You don't need a car. You could just hop right on the train.
It ain't gonna stop. Ain't gonna get pulled over.
Yeah, you're gone.
You're gone. Especially like you said, like at that time. It's just a perfect kind of escape. You just kind of get out of there. But another thing that just doesn't really quite add up, though, is you're saying a stranger had that much animosity towards this family. It's possible, but unlikely.
Yeah, I mean, I get what you're saying with that. It does seem like a crime of passion sort of deal. Like he had some sort of deep-rooted hatred for the family. I don't know, man. To me, people just snap. People are crazy. But yeah, I don't know. That's really interesting. I really don't know. I would, if I had to bet money, I would say Paul Mueller, but I just don't know, man.
And we may never know.
We probably never will know. With these old cases like this, I mean, I know sometimes we'll see like, 50-year-old cold case solved, but I mean, this is 1912, man. That's over 100 years ago. Like, there's no way it's gonna get solved. And plus, everyone's dead anyway, so...
Yeah, but people are still looking for retribution, even if, someone has died, they still want to know what happened. People, true crime historians want to know what happened that night. Not to mention that this house has gone on to become a haunted house. I mean, people have had like crazy experiences at this house, allegedly.
Is there videos on YouTube? People go on there?
All kinds of videos from the Villisca Axe horror house. You can find all kinds of things on it. And there are some very odd stories that come out of that for sure.
I might have to check those out.
Well, guys, that has been the Villisca Axe murders. If you guys have any theories or any stories of your own travels, maybe you guys have visited that house and have experienced some pretty odd things yourself, leave it down in the comments for us to check out. We'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, and be sure to hit subscribe and join Patreon if you want new stuff. And we're dropping videos every 2 weeks on the channel, every 2 weeks on Wednesday. You can get it up to 2 weeks early on Patreon for as little as $1, and it helps the channel, keep going. So be sure to check that out. Hit the like button, and that's about it.
We cannot wait to see you guys on the next one. Peace.
Later.